The story of the Haunting of Bly Manor begins with Danny Clayton, the new American au pair to the Wingrave siblings, but the previous au pair's absence is quite palpable, and her story is shrouded in mystery, deception, and death. We first get a tidbit of information from Henry Wingrave when Danny Clayton offers to drink with him at the bar to celebrate her worst and most awkward interview. With the alcohol loosening up Henry's usual tight lip, Danny learns that the previous au pair had killed herself on the grounds of Bly Manor. This is a quote from Henry Wingrave. "We did find someone for a while last summer. Promising young woman. The children liked her. And then well, I suppose she died. It was her fault, to be blunt. Her choice to be blunter." Here we learn that the previous au pair had killed herself on the grounds. But like everything regarding Bly Manor, this proves only to be partially true. The whole truth will be far more insidious and horrific. The next time the mysterious dead governess is brought up is by Flora during bath time. When Flora sees the butterfly hair comb clip that Miles had given Danny, she is shocked and quite upset to see Danny wearing it, saying that Miles shouldn't have given Danny the clip. When Danny asks her why, Flora responds, "Because it doesn't belong to you." Danny asks Flora who the clip belongs to which Flora responds, "Miss Jessel, the other one, before you." Danny is apologetic, but strangely, Flora looks away. She nods, and suddenly her demeanor changes back to her usual sweet self. But it's significant here, for it is the first time a name is given to the dead governess, Miss Jessel. Near the end of the first episode, Danny sees Hannah in the small chapel. She decides to ask about the strange talismans she has been finding around the house. These talismans were created by Flora. Hannah comments that this is a way for Flora to cope with all the loss the young girl has experienced in such a short amount of time, from her parents to Danny's predecessor. Here, Miss Jessel's first name is finally revealed by Hannah. Quote, "Rebecca. Poor Rebecca. She was a bright young thing. She was ambitious, intelligent, kind of heart. But there was a man, which really is the only thing that can bring down a woman like that. All the world's vices in disguise of its graces. Anyway, the less I say about him, the better. You know, he skipped town with a tidy sum of Henry's money and the poor thing's heart. Stole a lot, that one. Sticky fingers. And to see her in the days leading up to it, so broken, so empty. She was gone long before she waded into the lake. Flora found her, and Jamie found Flora. To hear her tell it, Rebecca's body in the water, face down, and little Flora, just stone still, staring. This is the most information given to the viewer so far about Rebecca Jessel, and Hannah's understanding of what happened to Rebecca would be the most comprehensive, but in some very unexpected ways. But finally, we, the audience, have a name to put to the dead governess, Rebecca Jessel. The first time viewers finally get to see Rebecca Jessel is in Episode 3, The Two Faces, Part 1. A part of her face is seen in the mirror of her compact, a deliberate shot done to evoke a sense of feminine mystique. Her face and name being hidden and revealed slowly over the episodes create a sense of mystery that surrounds Rebecca. This is a very deliberate visual and storytelling technique used to relay to the audience how Rebecca is seen by others. Her true self is obfuscated by her femininity, and men are blinded by her beauty and can only see her as a beautiful woman before seeing her for anything else, something to be coveted and to be possessed. She's first greeted by Peter Quint in the reception area. He notices right away that there is a stain on her blouse and asks if she would like some time to clean it up, to which she confidently places her ponytail over the stain and says that she's ready. Peter comments that Henry will see the stain, to which a baffled and confused Rebecca just comments, "Okay." When she enters, Henry Wingrave ignores her presence at first. Only when she tries to make small talk as a way to get started does he engage with her. She congratulates Henry on his win on a recent case, to which he just asks where she read it from. Right away, just as Peter said, he immediately noticed a spot on her blouse. As Rebecca tries to keep the conversation going, she also tries to give her condolences to Henry, but he interrupts her by asking Peter to conduct the interview, because Henry does not have his reading glasses on him. Peter notes that Rebecca's references are impeccable. Clearly, Rebecca's history speaks for itself. This prompts her to confess that she does have an interest in pursuing law, perplexing Peter and piquing Henry's interest. Peter continues to ask her why she is here for what he calls a nanny job, to which Rebecca replies, "I suppose I don't see it that way. I've always been good at it, to be honest. I have an inquiring mind. I ask questions for myself and of the world around me every day, and that's what I love to nurture in children. I trust that won't be a problem, Mr. Quint." From her interview, a lot can be deduced. Clearly, Rebecca is intelligent, capable, and has great aspirations. But the first thing Henry really comments on is the stain on her blouse. This highlights the class difference between Lord Wingrave and everyone else. He notices the stain hidden behind Rebecca's hair. The stain represents Rebecca's place in the world. She may try to hide her flaws and class status with all the impressive references in the world, but she will always be seen by people like Lord Wingrave as someone with a stain on their blouse, a lesser person who should not be held to high esteem, and therefore should not be taken seriously. Peter, on the other hand, seems to notice something more about Rebecca. He is the one who notices how impressive her history is, and seems to see her potential. This, however, will lead to Rebecca's undoing. From the moment Rebecca arrives to Bly, she is warmly greeted by the children and the staff, a scene that is eerily familiar to Danny Clayton's own welcome. Miles says to her right away, "Let me guess, you ought to be our very own Mary Poppins." To which Rebecca responds, "Well, I'm not practically perfect, but I am perfectly splendid." And splendid Rebecca was at making a great impression on the children. Flora immediately takes to Rebecca and even begins to use the phrase "perfectly splendid" often in her conversations. Flora leads Rebecca on a tour of the grounds, but before Rebecca leaves, she and Peter share a passing glance at one another, hinting at their blossoming attraction. Rebecca's charm and wit quickly make her a great fit at Bly. Like Danny, she is taken in by the natural beauty of Bly, and as the narrator states, Miss Jessel found herself, as she walked on the grounds of Bly for the first time, wishing that she might never leave, and it turned out she never would. In one of the sessions with the children, she's playing with one of Flora's talismans. Flora offers to make a talisman for Rebecca, and asks Rebecca what her favorite color is, to which Rebecca replies that she likes all the colors. Flora is determined to make Rebecca's talisman with all the colors. Their playtime is interrupted when Peter Quint makes an appearance with a bouquet of roses. We talked about this scene previously in the Miles Wingrave video, so please go watch that video as well. Peter offers the roses to Flora, which takes Rebecca back a bit with a pang of slight disappointment. Peter suggests to Flora that she might share the roses with Rebecca, to which Flora agrees. Flora and Rebecca leave to find some water for the flowers. Of course, this is all deliberate on Peter's part, as he uses Flora as a conduit to offer roses to Rebecca in a more roundabout way. He also wanted to toy with her feelings and get her to feel anticipation and slight disappointment. For now, Rebecca will be yearning for more attention from Peter. Later that night, as Peter is packing up to leave Bly, Rebecca invites him to stay for tea to wait out the storm outside. Here, Peter asks her how things are going, to which she jokes about having to clean up vomit. Rebecca meant it as a light-hearted joke, but Peter responds quite seriously, saying, "I'm sorry, that's not funny. One like you, smart as you are, well, it's offensive even." Here, Peter is able to question Rebecca more about her true intentions and what her long-term goals are. Rebecca admits that she wants to be a barrister like Henry Wingrave. But to become a barrister, Rebecca would need a mentor and a long-term pupillage. However, due to her being a woman, she will be seen as just a plaything for men in power, and she knows this. She had seen exactly that happening to women that have gone before her. Quote, 3 other women from my year managed to get one, and all left within the first year. A sea of old men trying to run the hand up your skirt every day for 6 months, while you try to persuade them that your brain isn't between your legs. Peter astutely sees her plan, but also points out its flaws. That by taking the au pair job, she will now be in the employ of somebody as influential as Henry Wingrave, without having to be subjected to potential harassment. But now, due to the children being so attached and reliant on her, it will be hard for her to be seen as anything else but a caregiver. It will now become a difficult task for someone like Henry Wingrave to give her a pupillage, because he will see her as part of the staff and not a mentee. He also notes that, quote, Henry is a QC and a master in trade legislation. But you knew that when you applied, didn't you? I see you, Rebecca. I see you. To which he tips his teacup to her as a sign of respect. A silent but contented Rebecca merely smiles and drinks her tea in return. Rebecca and Peter have a lot of chemistry and are obviously attracted to each other, and Peter's acknowledgement of her as a woman with a mind of her own and someone with ambition makes Rebecca drawn to him. While other men might regard Rebecca as a plaything or merely someone with a stain on their blouse, Peter makes Rebecca feel like she is seen by him, and this is something that she craves. Sometime after, Peter returns again to Bly, running another errand for Henry. This time, he stays for a few days. He drops by the classroom to say hello to the children and Rebecca. When he tells the group that he's staying for a few days, Miles asks if Henry is going to be coming to Bly anytime soon, to which Peter responds that he doesn't know. Miles is obviously upset with the response, so Peter consoles him and gives him his lighter, which is a very important keepsake due to it belonging to his father, and it is described as, quote, it's a little piece of him, one of the only nice bits really. This vulnerability draws Rebecca even closer to Peter. She gets to see a more vulnerable side of him, and this excites her. When night falls, their attraction to one another leads Peter to stop by Rebecca's room. When she opens the door and sees Peter, it's Rebecca that grabs him in for a kiss. The two then spend the night together. Peter and Rebecca's attraction to one another will progress very quickly into obsessive, destructive romance. This starts almost immediately after they spend their first night together. In the morning, when Rebecca has to get up for work, Peter is very insistent that she stay with him in bed. When she goes to leave, he gets quite visibly upset and grabs her arm rather harshly to get her to stay. Rebecca is able to placate him by telling him to have patience, but Peter stares off after her with an intense look in his eyes. Later that night, Peter brings Rebecca to the restricted wing of the house. She's hesitant, but he asks if she trusts him, to which she responds that she does. He has prepared a romantic gesture in the master bedroom for her. Peter offers Rebecca a beautiful coat. This fur coat belonged to the late Charlotte Wingrave. Rebecca is hesitant to take it, but Peter reassures her that it is okay. He claims that he had asked Henry's permission, and that it now belonged to her. Again, Rebecca is hesitant, but she does accept the gift. As she is trying it on, Peter suggests that she wear it on her bare skin to feel the full luxurious texture. Rebecca strips and gets into the coat. Peter tells that he wants to show her how beautiful she is, and begins to take Polaroids of her, and then of them together. They begin to kiss passionately and wind up in bed together. However, before things can go any further, Hannah Gross interrupts the pair, and an embarrassed and apologetic Rebecca flees. Here, we see that Rebecca does have a sense of what is the proper thing to do, but Peter acts as a bad influence on her and convinces her otherwise. She knows that going into the Forbidden Ring is wrong, but she trusts Peter, and that supersedes her trust in herself. She also senses that something is wrong about taking the coat, but again, after Peter's reassurances, she accepts. This will set a pattern in their relationship, with Peter leading and controlling Rebecca, and Rebecca following out of trust and love for Peter. Later that night, after having been scolded by Hannah, Rebecca and Peter rejoin the group in the kitchen. Owen is making some cake batter. He offers it to everyone, but once he gets to Rebecca, tension brews with Peter, who becomes visibly angry with jealousy. Later, when they are alone, Peter begins to pack up his things to leave, which confuses Rebecca. He begins to call her out for opening her mouth to taste the cake batter from Owen, insinuating that there's something sexual and that she should not have done that. Of course, this is pure gaslighting. Peter is emotionally manipulating Rebecca and trying to get her to perceive a completely innocent gesture from Owen as something of a sexual nature when in fact it wasn't. Owen did not offer the batter to just Rebecca as some sort of sexual innuendo or flirtation. He offered it to everyone, including Peter. Peter's jealousy and need to dominate Rebecca causes him to perceive things differently, and now he wants to make Rebecca see it that way as well. He then moves on, using something that she told him in confidence as some sort of ammunition against her, saying, "You wanted people to take you seriously. You said you took this job because you didn't want old men looking up your skirt or down your blouse. But age him down and dumb him up, and you just open up when you're told. Is that it? Do you have any idea what you look like?" Here, again, he's projecting his insecurities about Rebecca and other men onto Rebecca, blaming her for something that was only perceived not by anything based on any objective reality. He throws her own words against her and uses something that she told him in private as ammunition that is very unjustified and a huge breach of trust. She had told him all these things in confidence because she trusted him with her own thoughts and emotions, and in return, he uses her insecurities against her to further exert control. When she denies that there was anything with Owen, he says, "You're naive when you want to be. That's good to know. It's good to know that when a man asks you to put something in your mouth, he doesn't have to ask twice." Here, he's basically calling her a liar or deceptive, when it really is him who is being deceptive and manipulative. Here he belittles her as a sexual object for men's pleasure, exactly something Rebecca has tried desperately to avoid. He uses her own fears against her, and really is no better than the old men who harassed and abused their power over the women that Rebecca was fearful to become. He abruptly leaves Rebecca, and she is left stunned and confused. In episode 5, The Altar of the Dead, it appears that after some time later, Peter returns to Bly to apologize to her. Again, we see him here gaslighting Rebecca. He reappears and acts like everything is normal. When Rebecca becomes upset with him, he acts surprised like he hasn't done anything for her to be upset about, acting like she's being the unreasonable one. When she explains to Peter why she's angry, that he insinuated that she was some sort of whore just because she tasted a cake batter offered from Owen, Peter merely plays it off as if it wasn't a big deal, and that he wasn't even upset anymore. He apologizes to Rebecca, and unfortunately she does relent and allows him back into her life. She tells him that he can never speak to her like that again, and he agrees. In the same episode, Hannah Gross is trying to convince Rebecca that Peter is no good for her, but it seems to fall on deaf ears. Rebecca is so enamored with Peter, she's willing to overlook any of his flaws, even the more dangerous one. She explains, "I used to be a daddy's girl, until of course I grew up, and I wasn't anymore. I was a woman with my own opinions, desires, and aspirations, and my father didn't much encourage those. As far as he was concerned, my dreams were far out of my reach, and he felt I needed to be reminded of that constantly. So when you find someone who truly sees you, who truly believes in you, sometimes more than you believe in yourself, that you are smart enough and capable enough, and tells you so, well, you hold on to them and you don't let go, even if they're rough around the edges, even if they're not perfect, even if you lose yourself just a little." Hannah comments that Rebecca should not have to lose her sense of self to be in the relationship with anyone. But Rebecca disagrees, saying that love does it to everybody. Hannah tries to get Rebecca to see that this is beyond Peter not being perfect. Peter is dangerous and scares her, to which Rebecca replies, "He scares me too, but in the best way. Being with him might be scary at times, but it's also exciting and fun. And for the first time in my life, that little voice in my head saying I'm not good enough has disappeared. It's gone, and I've never felt so alive." Hannah responds with a really poignant line and cuts right to the problem with Rebecca's relationship with Peter. She says, "Oh darling, hey, there's a difference between feeling good and feeling alive. The two aren't always the same." Refusing to listen to what Hannah's trying to tell her, Rebecca storms off angrily. Later in the episode, during the night, Peter confesses to Rebecca that he's doing something big for both of them. Peter explains to Rebecca that Henry will never take either of them seriously, because to someone like Henry Wingrave, Rebecca and Peter will always just be the help. He suggests that they should leave for America, where with money, they can be anyone who they want to be. He urges her to pack her bags and be ready to leave when he returns to Bly for her. He doesn't tell her his full plans, but it is clear that both Rebecca and Peter are very excited for their prospects in America. Here is a tender moment where we seem to see something genuinely optimistic about Peter and Rebecca's relationship. Sadly, this is moments right before Peter is killed by the lady in the lake. Rebecca in this scene is reliving this moment. It is a memory, and she expresses that this is one of her favorites, despite being right before Peter's death, because this is the moment they shared something together where Peter was being his most himself. Sometime later, a policeman comes by to investigate the disappearance of Peter Quint. Everyone had assumed that he had run off stealing a good sum of money from Henry. Rebecca is as forthcoming as she can be, but insists that Peter would not have run away, at least not without her. She is in fact right. Peter had not run away. He was killed and dragged into the lake by the spirit of Viola. Rebecca spends the next days miserable. She assumes that Peter had abandoned her and left without her. As she is pondering and wallowing in her loss and grief, she looks on at the lake and at the butterfly clip Peter had given her. Jamie approaches Rebecca to try to get Rebecca to see that this is an opportunity. Jamie tells her that this is a moment for her to try to get back on track to her original plans to be a barrister, plans she had before she met Peter Quint. This suggestion from Jamie does seem to spark some sort of hope for Rebecca, and she begins to make plans to talk to Lord Wingrave about a potential pupillage. Later that night, a more calm and contented Rebecca looks into the mirror at her own reflection. She appears happier than she has been for days. She sets the butterfly hair clip down as if to leave it behind, symbolizing a potential transformation, leaving Peter behind to begin anew. As she walks to the bedroom, however, Peter appears from the shadows, startling her. Rebecca is greatly upset with him, and she berates him for making her an accomplice to his crimes. She is aghast at the prospect, and it is clear that Rebecca truly had no desire to steal from Henry Wingrave. Peter tries to calm her down and give Rebecca an explanation to prove that he did not willingly leave her. Peter once again asks Rebecca to trust him and to hold out her hand. He asks her to think of the only reason why he would not be able to be with her, to which he demonstrates by showing his hands going right through hers, clearly showing her that he is dead and exists as a trapped spirit. This revelation weighs heavily on Rebecca's mind, and throughout the next few days, she is completely preoccupied with thoughts of Peter Quint. She becomes distracted and distant to the living, and is completely transfixed with the dead Peter Quint. When night falls, Rebecca sneaks to the Forbidden Wing to meet Peter. There she offers to just leave with Peter, to still go to America with him. He would be a spirit, and people might assume that she was a crazy lady who talked to thin air, but that would be preferable for Rebecca than to be without Peter. Peter explains to her that that would not be possible. He is trapped at Bly and cannot leave. When he tries to pass the property line, he just returns to the spot where he was killed. Rebecca starts to become distraught and begins to yell in anguish. Peter tries to calm her down, and in this moment, a slight burst of emotions and an accidental touch leads to a discovery. Peter is able to possess Rebecca's body temporarily, and this leads them to hatch a new plan. The next day, Rebecca is seen about to leave the house. Jamie is arranging flowers in the foyer, and stopped to ask Rebecca if she talked to Henry about the pupillage. Rebecca responds rather curtly and acts rather strangely towards Jamie, saying that she called Henry and said that he would consider it. Jamie is frustrated with Henry for Rebecca, but Rebecca responds quite nonchalantly, which puzzles Jamie. Once outside, Rebecca walks towards the property line and takes off running towards it. She suddenly stopped, however, by the powers of Bly and falls to the ground. This expels Peter from her body and reveals that Peter was in control of her, explaining Jamie's and Rebecca's weird interaction. The couple's plan of having Peter possess Rebecca and using her as a vessel to flee Bly had failed. More and more, Rebecca withdraws from everyone, isolating herself from the children and the staff at Bly. She's too preoccupied with her desire for Peter and her to be reunited, and she can think of little else. One night, Peter returns to Rebecca with new revelations and a new plan, a plan that would reunite them forever. Rebecca is immediately interested. Their initial attempts of smuggling Peter out of Bly by using Rebecca's body as a host seems to have failed due to what Peter calls blips. He believes that these blips are due to Rebecca eventually pushing him out involuntarily, because both of them are struggling for control, but only one can steer, so to speak. When one person is in control, the other is tucked away, a phrase used to describe the strange experience of living one's old memories. Peter believes that if Rebecca invites him into herself permanently, that it would stick, and they would be together forever, sharing a life, as two halves of a whole. Rebecca is reluctant, but her yearning for Peter causes her to agree. But before that, she asks him if he would take care of her, and that they will be together, and more importantly, that they will share everything as equals, to which he responds that he promises. As a response to this, she utters the iconic phrase, "It's you, it's me, it's us." Their hands touch, and Peter and Rebecca merge, her left eye changing to Peter's blue. Rebecca is tucked away into a memory, the one of her and Peter in the forbidden wing of the house the night he gave her a fur coat. She comes to the realization that she's being tucked away, and she's confused, asking Peter, "I thought we'd be together." To which he responds, "But we are." Unfortunately for Rebecca, Peter had ulterior motives, and his plans were not what he promised her. In control of Rebecca, he walks to the lake. He tucks her into a different comforting memory of the two of them, as he proceeds with his grim plan for her. Unbeknownst to Rebecca, Peter, in full control of her body, begins to wade into the cold waters of the lake, submerging her deep underwater, deep enough to see his own body at the bottom of the lake. As her body painfully drowns, Rebecca begins to realize what had happened. A vision of the surface of the water appears in her memories as she's being tucked away. Suddenly, Peter is gone and she is alone. She's left to experience her final moments of life, alone, scared, and painfully gasping for air. In the morning, a stunned Flora finds Rebecca's body floating in the lake. Jamie, walking by the lake, witnesses the horrible tableau and whisks Flora off, but not without Flora seeing the distraught spirit of Rebecca Jessel crying out in anguish over her own dead body in the water. After another instance of being tucked away, Rebecca comes to again, realizing what Peter had done to her. They were sharing a memory of the time with the fur coat again. However, this time, as Peter begins to take Polaroids of them, the photos show them as decaying corpses to reflect the reality of their situation. Rebecca becomes enraged at Peter for lying to her and murdering her. He assures her that he had to do what he did and that there was a way out of this situation. This is the sinister plan that would require the use of the Wingrave children, Flora and Miles. Visiting the children and bonding with them, Peter with Miles and Rebecca with Flora, the plan is to convince the children to agree to invite them in permanently, like what Peter had done to Rebecca. But instead, each couple will take control of their corresponding child and leave Bly with the children tucked away forever. Peter and Rebecca would be in control of the children's bodies and have a second chance of life. In return, the children will get to live in their memories, being reunited with their parents, so to speak. Of course, this is a sinister and heinous plan, for being tucked away is not as idyllic and splendid as Peter makes it sound. It can be incredibly disorienting and can be very distressing for those being tucked away. But desperate and scared, Rebecca agrees to the plan. Appearing to Flora and bonding with her, she asks Flora for her help, and the two have been in communication for some time now, explaining why Flora would sometimes look off into seemingly thin air. One night, when Danny Clayton happened to walk into one of these moments when Rebecca was showing herself to Flora, Danny sees Rebecca, and the plans are pushed into the next phase. Danny is subdued and tied up in the attic, and Peter convinces Rebecca and the children that the time to execute their final plans is upon them. The children seemingly agree, and both Miles and Flora speak the words of incantation. It's you. It's me. It's us. The children fall down to the ground and are seemingly tucked away forever. The plan seemingly a success. Peter, in control of Miles, goes off to get rid of Hannah Gross, who was calling after the children. But Rebecca had plans of her own. It is revealed in episode 7, The Two Faces Part 2, that Rebecca had been telling Flora to pretend to be tucked away. Since Peter was now in Miles, he could no longer see Rebecca. Once Miles was gone, Rebecca and Flora worked to free Danny. Flora is confused and concerned for Rebecca, saying, "I thought we were playing a game, and I thought you needed my help." Rebecca responds solemnly, "No, Flora, no one should ever need that much help, not from anyone else." She urges Danny to leave Bly and to take Flora far away from the house. A grateful Danny thanks her and tries to leave with Flora, but the pair are later stopped by the lady in the lake. When all seems lost and Flora is about to be taken into the lake to be drowned, Rebecca follows Viola out to the lake. She cannot save Flora from her grisly fate, but she offers something that is very compassionate to Flora, and offers to spare the little girl the pain from drowning. She tucks Flora away one last time, to a happy memory, and Rebecca faces a second horrible drowning. Luckily for Flora and all those trapped at Bly, Danny Clayton breaks the curse over Bly, freeing the unfortunate souls that were trapped there. Rebecca is seen one last time by the surprised Owen. Her last words are, "Do you feel that?" before passing into the unknown. The story of Rebecca Jessel is a tragic one, a promising young, intelligent, and ambitious woman brought down by a destructive romance. Peter had taken everything from her, first her ambitions, then her autonomy, and then her life. Even in the afterlife, he would not let Rebecca be free, making her an unwilling accomplice to his schemes. Rebecca is a woman of integrity. She wanted to be a barrister, but her passions and affections for Peter blinded her and led her astray down a dark path. When Flora offered to make Rebecca a talisman, she asked Rebecca what her favorite color was, to which Rebecca replied, "All the colors." So Flora made the talisman in black, because Miles had told her that all the colors combined would make the color black. The color black is very symbolic of Rebecca, a complicated and sophisticated woman who is shrouded in mystery, sensuality, grief, and death. While Rebecca was coerced into the horrible plan to take over Flora's body by Peter, she ultimately chooses her own path away from him. She freed Danny and wanted Flora to be safe, choosing to remain at Bly forever and suffering the same fate of those other faceless, voiceless ghosts of Bly instead of harming Flora. Again, when Flora was about to face a horrible death, Rebecca offered to take the pain away, the pain she unfortunately had to suffer before due to Peter's actions. Rebecca's story is a cautionary tale of letting destructive passions consume one's self and placing one's trust in the wrong partner. While there may have been some genuine affection and love between Rebecca and Peter, Peter proved to be selfish and obsessive. He prioritized himself over her, and their relationship was never equal. Rebecca shows herself to be brave and kind, and in her final moments at Bly, it is significant that she chose not to go to Peter, but to remain with her friends before disappearing forever. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, please click the like button and subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks again.